Your first 500 viewers.
Yeah.
If you can secure, let's forget 500. If you can secure 100 strangers who peruse your work, 100 strangers who consume your art, that means you have a solid foundation to build on.
That was Rumman R Kalam. He is the acting in charge of new media at the Daily Star, the largest circulating English daily newspaper in Bangladesh. He is also the co-founder of Bangladesh's first humor website, Rantages. Rantages started off by making original humor pieces for the internet, and today they've transitioned into a meme empire. It was my pleasure to sit down with Rumman and speak about stuff that we were both very, very passionate about. We spoke about the current state of the internet culture, the ethical side of stealing memes, and how you can use your memes to start earning some money. Now, if you've been getting any value out of this podcast, there are a few ways through which you can support the show. Number one, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would mean the world to me if you can leave a review or a rating there. If you think someone else would find these conversations valuable, simply share the links with them, be it a friend or a family member. And if you're on social media, a simple share can go a long, long way, given your followers and connections are into this kind of stuff. And finally, if you want to be updated about the upcoming episodes and follow my work, then simply visit www.tawsifakkas.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'll be sending a weekly short, quick email where I'll be curating some of the best creative content that I come across online. I consume a ton of content, and I find that the best way to create a community is to start sharing some of this stuff with like-minded people like yourself. Now, as always, I've taken a very long time with the intro, so here is episode 3 of the State of the Creators podcast with Tawsif Akkas, featuring Rumman R Kalam. Hope you enjoyed the show. This is the State of the Creators, a show about creative individuals who are on a quest to build something out of nothing. Pretty ASMR-ish, isn't it?
It is.
Just say Rantages.
Oh man. ASMR on a creepy level.
It is fucking creepy, man. So have you seen some of that stuff on the creepy
there's this
like child or something doing ASMR, and I'm like, what the fuck? All these 40-year-old men just is their target demographic.
There's
That's
also this girl who folds clothes, and that's ASMR.
Some people do genuinely find it very relaxing, but I don't know.
I mean, a lot of people find Norwegian death metal relaxing as well, so
fair enough.
Whatever.
No need to judge. Before anything else, actually talk to me about the vaping culture
in Bangladesh. It's obnoxious. Like every single vape shop I've ever been to has been a terrible experience for me.
How
because usually what I do is I study the products, do a bit of online research, and I know what I want.
Yeah.
And then I go to the shop and I'm like, I want this. And they're like, no, you don't need that. Like, why don't I need that? You can't use that. Like, why can't I use that? And then the next 15 minutes will be a lecture about like what...
the product.
Yeah. And end of the day, it just feels more like they're helping their distributors rather than helping the customer.
That sounds pretty much like the entire experience that I have with any Bangladeshi outlet. Well, more or less.
Yeah, that's true. But there are very few outlets that are not like that. Especially the ones that are very old, like the camera repairman at Newmarket. Every single photographer goes to him.
Right.
But it's a part of, I think, transition of Bangladesh into the service industry.
Now that makes sense. So for the people unfamiliar with your work, who is Rumman R Kalam?
I'm known mostly among the internet crew as the founder of Rantages, the Goat Lord, and I'm also the editor in charge of Shout, which is the weekly youth magazine of the Daily Star. I've been the editor for the last year or so, and I've been working there for almost 7 years. And apart from that, I work as a communications and content consultant.
Nice.
And in the past, I have done web programming. I have recently I produced a film. In 2017 LitFest, my book came out, Disconnect, Collected Short Fiction, which I edited with 2 other friends.
Yep.
And Yeah, basically, I just try to do a little bit of everything.
Right. So, I guess a writer, a media personality, music maker.
I don't think I've gone that far yet, but the reason that I had to do so many things is not because I want it to be, at least not want in a sense where, like every day I write and it's a thing that I genuinely want to do. But when it's something like, let's say, graphic design, I had to learn graphic design as well since I worked in both digital and print publication.
Yeah.
And all of those things I had to learn because I could not depend on anyone. Right. Even in a professional setting, let's say Rantages was something that's very informal and voluntary.
Yeah.
So I have to manage my expectations at some point.
Yeah.
But after working in places where people were actually salaried employees and, those who have contractual responsibilities, these people have failed me more times than actual like people who volunteered.
Right.
Right. And that's simply because there's this huge lack of communication, B, knowledge. One big problem is that whenever someone acquires even a little bit of knowledge, they think they're better than everyone, they know better than everyone. And unfortunately, I myself have done that. But end of the day...
there's the old Rumman.
Every day there's an old Rumman.
That's fantastic. I love that quote. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm not the sort of person, who's going to hold on to opinions because, I voiced a certain opinion at one point. Yeah. Let's say even 4 or 5 years back when I was a teenager, I was very critical of feminism.
Right.
And that, it was very obvious from the work I was producing due to there were a lot of sexist jokes and I would basically pass them off as, get a thicker skin and, just deal with it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But later on, after, I read some feminist literature and I had a lot of help from my girlfriend who actually taught me feminism in a way. And from that, what I understood is that when you're communicating something to a person and let's say it's a joke, right?
Yep.
Why is it that for your joke to be funny, it has to target a marginalized group?
Right.
Right. You can do comedy without targeting marginalized groups, as we can see recently with Hassan Minhaj, Trevor Noah.
Yep.
They're great comedians. And we're recently also seeing...
Lily Singh.
A lot of what we'd consider AAA great comedians, like, let's say, Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, yeah.
Dave Chappelle got $40 million for his Netflix specials, all of them.
Yeah.
And the last one was absolute garbage. Because you could clearly see he wanted to do something, but it felt like he just wrote it last night.
Right.
And those sort of comedic routines don't really fly anymore. Right. So
to be fair though, to Dave, I think Rotten Tomatoes is probably not the greatest indicator anymore, but the critics gave it a really low score.
Yeah.
But the audience loved it. It's like 99% on the thing. So I guess it's quite an interesting kind of spectrum we're at right now, where I think anything kind of flies these days if you just put it out there and you have some sort of brand, and it'll reach to a certain audience who enjoys that certain content.
The thing is, the 10% rule, right? Like if you're reaching 100 people, at least 10 people will resonate with whatever message you're sending out.
Right.
And with the internet, that's very easy now.
Yeah.
Right. You can reach 1 million people quite easily.
Yeah.
And the thing is, at the end of the day, we have people who believe in flat Earth. We have people who believe aliens control us and stuff like that, right? So that's not really a metric. Popularity should not be a metric of how good a piece of media is.
Right.
And that's why we need critics.
Right.
Why do we need critics? Because any piece of media should be dissected and it should be criticized.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's one thing that Bangladesh does not have at all whatsoever. Because let me just give you an example. Sometime in 2014, there was this album out by this band who did the album for a movie, but the movie did not come out, so they just released the album as it is. And we did a review of it, and we gave it a 7 out of 10.
Right.
And the band was fine with it. They were like, wow, 7 out of 10. We expected, a lesser score.
Yeah.
But the fans got angry.
Yeah.
They were like, 7 out of 10? Why? It's a 10 out of 10 album, blah, 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 all of that jazz. And 2-3 years come, and it's been 4 years, and people aren't listening to that album.
Right.
So if we did give that 10 out of 10 back then, what would it look like now? Even that 7 out of 10 seems a bit
high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So until we have a culture where, criticisms are listened to rather than rejected without even considering what the other person is saying, that's an issue. And the final issue that I have are with the people who provide the criticism themselves.
Yeah.
The thing is, they basically try to school the piece of content or put it in its place. And that's a very zero-sum game, I would say, because that's not how discussions go forward. Because when you criticize something and you put it down straight away in very aggressive language and intonation, what it does, when someone reads it, they will obviously react defensively. And that's anyone in the world.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of effort has to be put in where criticism has to be palatable for the person reading it. So it's, again, a systematic thing that's going around.
Right. I think, so I guess going back to your creative, or I guess your passion for creating stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey. So was there any specific point in your life where you thought, this is exactly what I want to do? Or did you had like this, built up angst which kind of turned into Rantages, and that kind of built into these things? It's quite fascinating to see with your involvement in all these different mediums. What I want to kind of touch base on is that, do you have any one singular moment of inspiration, or was it more like you always knew this is what I wanted to do?
I think the singular moment of inspiration came to me in 2013 when I left my band Eclectic, where I played bass. And that band was a very intense journey for me because I was not a very good musician. I just started learning the bass, and my friend Imran was like, "Oh, you can play with us, just start playing." Yeah. And I did. And the thing is, I'm talking about Imran Ahmed, the jazz musician. Yeah. He has always been supremely talented. Like he's he's one of two people I actually look up to in Bangladesh in terms of like what they're doing and how they approach their work.
He's fantastic. He's touring right now, isn't he?
Yeah, he toured Germany, and it's amazing. And I could not keep up with him those 2 years, and that had a very bad effect on me. And afterwards, I felt creatively exhausted. To this day, I can't play music because I have a lot of negative
emotions
attached to music. And after quitting the band, it was not just quitting the band, it was quitting an entire friend circle that I had with musicians and etc. Yeah. After that, I was pretty much alone one day, and I was like, I didn't have money to buy cigarettes, I somehow, I think, got $10-20 and got a few Starlights, and I was smoking, and I was thinking that I don't even have enough money to buy cigarettes. Like, what am I doing? Yeah. So the first thing I decided was like, okay, first things first, if I need to work, I need cigarettes, and I can't ask for cigarette money from my mom. Yeah. So how do I buy cigarettes? And that's when my friend Barish knocked me and was like, "Yo, do you want to write for Rising Stars? They're taking writers." Yeah. I was like, might as well. It'll pay for my cigarette money. Right. And I applied to Rising Stars, and from that moment, I realized after going to the first RS meeting that what I had at Rantages from 2008-9 is something massive. It's not just a website or a platform. It's sort of it has or had a cultural impact at one point. Yeah. So I decided, let's just start what I am good at. The only thing I know for sure that I'm good at. Yeah. And that's when my entire mindset changed from expecting things to show up or expecting things to work out in a certain way, because we are taught from ever since we go into school that if we follow this route, at the end of this, whatever it is, after 15 years, you get a job, you do this, blah, blah, blah. And right at that age, I realized that's not going to work out for me, because it's not working out for a lot of different people. Yeah. And I just started Rantages with like 3 kids. And that was the moment I realized, Bangladesh does not have the labor to actually do something like this. So what can I do? So I decided to train the labor. Right. And over the past 6 years or so, I've worked with some amazing young professionals who are 17, 18 years old. And they have gone on to do pretty good things. Like some of them are working with me at the Daily Star.
Yep.
Some have joined Grameenphone, a lot of good companies. So overall, what that journey taught me was how to lead a team.
Yep.
And not only that, how to nurture the creativity and the talent of other people as well.
Right.
And what that allows me is I have a much bigger freedom in the marketplace in terms of doing big projects.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I did this project for A2I, Udbhavakar Khoje.
Yep.
It was a reality show, sort of like Shark Tank,
Yep.
where people pitch ideas to the government.
Yep.
And the entire story, script, the format, everything was done by my team. And this is the same team that I inherited from Rantages.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of doing creative projects for me, which, as you can see, Disconnect, the band, Rantages,
Yep.
Shout, the film. So that epiphany actually led towards me becoming the creative professional I am today.
Right. So I guess we could all trace it back to that that starlight
Yeah.
that you couldn't afford at that time. With Rantages, though, it's interesting you say that before you got into Rising Stars, you had built this brand essentially for let's just say a comedy platform of its own back then, which had a fair bit of impact. And then you got into Rising Stars.
Yeah.
Up until that point, you didn't really think of it as something bigger than itself. But then once you got into Rising Stars, that's when you felt that this is a much more than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then you used your experience at Rising Stars to go back into Rantages simultaneously and building it up. And then using Rantages as well to build up your...
Yeah. Like one thing I say regarding this is a descriptor sort of, I'm made by Rantages but tempered by Shout.
Right.
Because in print media, because Rantages was a very, it was quite bold for its time.
Yeah.
And, we were very crass and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what working in print media taught me was that my boss, Karim Wahid, says, print is like firing a gun.
Yeah.
Once the bullet is out, you can't take it back in.
Absolutely.
And that teaches you a completely different level of responsibility that you won't ever get in digital media.
Yeah.
Because digital media, honestly speaking, is a constant work in progress.
Right.
But when it's print, everything has to be, people don't even allow typos.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to make a typo.
Exactly.
Print. And these were the things that actually taught me how to be responsible with content, how to actually communicate in a manner that's not so aggressive.
Yeah.
So that has been the effect of RS.
That's fantastic, because I was speaking to Ahmed Fahad, who's the vice president of growth at Patao. He he said something along the lines of that obstacles breed creativity, because in a way you're giving constraints with your print media, and because you can't do or change or click edit and then change that caption, you're forced to think, rethink, and be creative about it. I find that fascinating that you learn it through traditional forms, which we are easy to...
kind of disagree with the obstacle thing, because it's a narrative that's aggressively pushed by corporate circles. And that's because usually what happens is you're given an impossible deadline or an impossible project.
Right.
And when you mention that it's impossible, your line manager will say, take it up as a challenge. And this has sort of become the crutch for forcing people to work under very, very harrowing circumstances.
I agree with what you say there. I guess the context was different to what was portrayed.
In that sense, recently I've been reading this book, Talent Code by Daniel Quell. And he mentions that how obstacles are used for certain professionals. There's this tennis, what do you call it? They're not clubs.
Schools or something?
Something like that. They train tennis players, right? Sharapova came from there.
Okay.
So what they did was they would practice without a ball.
Right.
So they would slowly, at agonizing pace, they would do each serve and each swing to perfect the movement. And this led to so many great Russian tennis players. And the thing is, obstacles can be good. Limitations can be good. In a sense where, footballers don't practice in full pitches, right? There's a reason.
I guess when obstacles are created for the sole purpose of creativity makes sense, but when obstacles are created to save money or to profit someone else, that's, I guess, the corporate problem that you have. That I think completely makes sense as well. But it's interesting for me because you mentioned traditional media is something we kind of tend to disregard, with, especially in the digital circle, like, oh, who cares about this stuff? But it taught you more than what you would have otherwise.
The thing is, for a creative professional, the discipline that a newspaper, a media organization, or an ad agency will instill upon you, that is something you can carry for the rest of your life.
Right.
Because I worked in an ad agency for like 5 months.
Right.
And it was a positive experience for me because working under Tanvir Bhai of Sun Communication is actually a privilege because he is the best advertising mind in the country.
Right.
And the lessons in creative leadership I learned there, and how to manage crunch periods, and you have a very messed up deadline the next day, and all of you are at work, and everyone knows that they're going to spend the entire night at work. And during these times is when leadership plays a key role, like showing up at 10 or 11 p.m. with takeaway, and then feeding everyone before
actually caring for your employees.
Actually caring for your employees,
and that's something I've noticed you have also kind of pursued with your team at Rantages. You see, you go to meetups, you try to make sure that they get breaks and stuff like that.
Because the thing is, for one thing, I really worked hard behind is job placement for Rantages, and I don't do it in a sense where I look for the jobs. Rather, I prepare the person for the job so they can find the job themselves.
Right.
And that has enabled me so much because these people, once they leave Rantages, it's actually not the end for Rantages. Right. Because they're moving on to do bigger things, and they can involve Rantages in the process. They can involve me in the process.
So it's an investment.
Yeah, it's an investment.
Some people might think, I'm spending $500 on a burger for each person. But
I think
at the end of the day,
what's worse than $500 is all those hours at night I'm staying up talking to someone young who's really
caring, and you're actually caring for their growth. Yeah,
because I don't think leadership is something that you can sort of like you have a checklist and then check the box. It's not something like that.
It's very unique to the individual.
It's very unique,
and your team as well.
It's very unique to the individual, and it's a lifestyle, honestly speaking. So you have to understand when to actually sacrifice for your team and when to not. That's also an important part.
I think that's in your Facebook bio as well. Leadership is a lifestyle.
Oh, no, it's not.
I want to talk to you about longevity through adaptation, right? That's something really attracts me about Rantages is because the not only the growth it has seen and the early cultural impact, because I guess right now it's a bit too saturated to say have one impact. But I remember the earlier days when that was pretty much one of its kind. But what interests me most is how it was a website first. It then became like, a Facebook meme page, and then slowly it's a group community.
So we right now have podcasts.
You have podcasts as well in the middle. With Fahad Zaman as well. I remember that. You went to radio show to do that as well. I remember that phase. And then eventually now you're basically a community. I want to talk to you more about this adaptation phases, because at the end of the day, you could have been very smug and said, you know what, we're a website. We want to be a website. That's exactly nothing, doesn't matter. But you have chosen these little adaptations based on the trends. I want to know more about your thought process in going through those phases.
Well, firstly, it was easier to do. It was not, the adaptations were not difficult at all for me, I would say. And that's because from the get-go, I had a very clear identity of Rantages. And one that would be community-based, and it would always be for the people.
Right.
Like, what do the people want? Like, if you look at our old About Us and everything, it's always about serving humor to the people. And why is it that we took that route? Because as a comedian in Bangladesh, I absolutely hate most of the comedy produced here, because it's forced laughter at this point. So I want to make something of my own that's new. And regarding formats, right? You have memes, you have articles, you have even videos. My idea was always how to get the most amount of audience, but quality audience.
Right.
Right, because I could have gone the Modulos route and, spammed people with relatable memes.
Yeah.
We did not do that. Right. And the thing is, I don't know. I mean, recently it has stopped, I guess. But up until 2017, if you saw a Rantages meme, you would know it's a Rantages meme.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part about our culture, because the idea of Rantages is that we will have a certain identity, we will have a certain brand that we will carry to different formats. And that is one of the main reasons we never went into video, is because we did go into video, but it was not a good experience because we could not take that framing and that brand image to videos.
Yeah.
Because if we did, it would become intensely expensive. Because our original idea was something like The Daily Show or SNL.
Right.
But those are very expensive
to produce.
Those need skilled labor. Because even if I did have the money, I don't think I'll have the talent to do that. So overall, I think the adaptation came due to market forces.
Yep.
Right. Because people stopped reading articles.
Right.
So if we kept aggressively pushing articles, that would not make sense.
So knowing your audience, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for you, the key was that you knew who you wanted to target from the get-go.
Yeah. And the thing is, I always maintained a very close a very close tie with the first 100 fans. And what the first 100 fans of Rantages say matter a lot to me, because these people became the fan not because of the fact that they know me or because, they have certain obligations. No, these are people who have been following us since 2008.
Right.
And most of them provide such good constructive criticism. Yeah. Like, back then you used to do things this way. How come you're not doing it this way now? Yeah. And these conversations always they work sort of like a reference point for me.
Right.
Like, wait, I was like this before. Yeah. Wait, this is what my audience wants. So that also played in with our adaptations over the years. And another huge factor was manpower.
Right.
Because around 2014, writers started drying up, because that's the same time when companies started hiring content writers for their websites and stuff. Yep. So writers ended up with a lot of work.
Right.
Low pay work, but still it's work. So that made us lose a lot of writers. Right. And before that, we had Fahad as a videographer. Back then, video wasn't booming just yet. It started after 2013, 14. Yep. So we had Fahad back then. So after losing Fahad, after losing my writers, I had to rethink, because I could not recruit writers any longer, because I could not honestly provide them the incentive, right? So after that, I realized I have probably the best bunch of meme makers in the country, with Asif Zaman, Ishaq Masroor, Tawsif. Yeah. And I decided, let's double down on memes and let's see how it goes. Yeah. And that just blew everything up. Yeah. Right. And our growth was so crazy that at one point, a lot of us were like, are we growing too fast? I don't like the new audience we're getting. So manpower was a huge factor behind me adapting to the market as well. Yeah. So, yeah.
I want to talk to you about stealing online content, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting kind of landscape that we're in right now, where I guess defining stealing in itself and also what kind of content we're talking about is very dynamic. But I remember a few months back, or maybe last year.
Yes, I think it's been a couple of years.
Yeah, when you part of the community that you have, Rantages Code Posting, there was a thing about that where you're still completely against it. Like if it's someone else's content, you're going to just zero tolerance, right? Which is awesome. What I want to explore more is your understanding or your perspective of what does it entail in terms of stealing content? Because I'll give you a bit of context from my perspective. I would see some, I guess, videos. It could be like a short, 10-second clip or something like that, and it could pretty much have things from someone completely different. Like maybe it came filtered through 5 or 6 different people, and the original content creator has basically no idea of where it has landed. And the person who's posted it has no idea where it's from. And we see it pretty much every day. I guess the easiest format to be able to do that is obviously a meme, which is why lots of people would have their signatures or the watermarks on them. And I guess we try to, a few people I've seen villainize the people who would just take it and post it. Some people want credit, some people don't. It's it's a bit of a messy situation because we want to pay credits or we want to acknowledge the people who's made these contents, but at the same time, there isn't really a systematic process of allowing that. I want to know your perspective, first of all, and if what we can do to, I guess, ensure that we acknowledge the creators, if at all.
That's actually a platform-specific problem.
Yeah.
It's not what we can do, but rather what Mark Zuckerberg wants to do. And the thing is, there's absolutely no conversation around the creative output or the creative product of meme makers.
Right.
Whereas you have meme makers creating content for brands now.
Right.
If you look at global examples like Arby's, Burger King.
Yeah.
Right. They definitely have teenagers behind the keyboard there.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a monetary value on memes that brands have identified. And that's one thing. Let's set that aside. So we already know there's an inherent value as a means of communication or brand communication for memes, right? And what this does is currently, due to the lack of any sort of care from the platform owners, what's happened is memes are basically dumped onto the internet. And whoever wants to, they can just go through the dump and pick whatever they like and post it on their page, which is something that a lot of big Instagram pages do.
Correct.
And the thing is, if we are to start this crusade against stolen content regarding memes, it honestly will go nowhere.
Exactly.
Because it's something that's not trackable.
Yeah.
Because I remember talking to this big tech company in Bangladesh who wanted to feature our memes on their platform. And I asked them, like, what will happen if, let's say, the original memes that we give you guys, like someone just screenshots them and posts them on their page. And their response was, as a big company, we can take legal action, blah, 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 all of that. Like, okay, that's great. But what about, let's say, a non-resident Bangladeshi in the UK? Right. What if he steals the meme and starts posting it for Bangladeshi audiences? What do you do then? And they had no answer to that. That was one thing. And another thing was...
was that answer that... Sorry to cut you off there. Did that answer actually open your eyes to the situation?
Yeah. In a sense, when we're talking about data inherently wants to be free. Right. So memes in that sense, currently the way they're treated, because they're not treated as a separate piece of media on the internet. Videos are, Vines are, like what TikTok is doing, they are, but memes are not. The last platform to actually consider memes as a media is probably Meme Center. Right. They're still going. And this brings us to the question whether or not we can ever have like memes, trackable memes. We definitely can, because you have machine learning now. Right. So you can set that up to find, like, scour the internet for wherever your memes are going. Like, that's something that's already being used by stock image websites. Right.
Exactly.
You can implement that. You don't need to think about like blockchaining memes or stuff like that. So that again is a platform specific thing that's something we can't ever push. And that brings us to the question, like, what can we do to turn this to our advantage, like memes being stolen?
Right.
I realized that Bangladesh lacks, especially in these areas, Bangladesh lacks creativity a lot. So what ended up happening is we started supplying memes to all the meme pages. Like at sometime last year, I took off the rule we had that, whenever our content gets stolen, like we're gonna go brigade and then ask them to take it down. And we decided it's actually better if our memes go around. Exactly. And what we started doing is we started putting in like hidden things inside the memes, like our 2.4 CGPA meme. The Rantages goat head was visible even on 9gag, Reddit, everywhere.
Correct.
Right. So what this enables us is we can now track our memes, the flow of our memes. And we can take this data to, let's say, brands and say, look, this is how we can set up a meme campaign for you. And this is how it will propagate. And the very same people who are stealing our memes are actually paying our money now. Because by sharing our memes, they're actually increasing the engagement of our work.
Correct. And then you bring it to the table and say, this is actually the real engagement. Because the quality of the meme, is so high that it's going to travel.
And more importantly, we know what will travel. So we can sort of curate the that way. And at the end of the day, what this does is everybody wins. Like the person who's stealing the memes, they get their few likes. We get our propagation. So overall, rather than yelling, don't steal our memes, we went for let's make our memes have a cultural impact.
Right.
And right now, our templates still, to this day, Rantages got posted. Everyone waits for RGP templates.
Yeah.
And whenever we bring out a template, meme template, every single meme page in the country goes after that template.
Yeah.
So in essence, they're actually giving us more control by stealing our content.
Right.
So that's how we're democratizing our content and at the same time getting value out of it.
Right. I think that's very smart because you're not only using something that's being that's being held against you, you're actually creating value out of it for multiple groups of people. I think that's really smart. But going forward, though, you mentioned something about I guess quality work with memes. How do you define quality in your line of work? It doesn't have to be specifically in Rantages. You can also go ahead and talk about Shout, but mostly from an online content point of view, what would be a quality piece of work from a meme?
When we're discussing the issue of quality, the idea of quality itself is sort of vague in Bangladesh.
Yep.
Because we have this entire generation of artists who are not trying to send a message or not trying to tell a story, but trying to get people to click.
Right.
So when you have an entire generation of artists trying to make people click their link or whatever it is, it runs the risk of just rehashing stuff, which we're clearly seeing with our YouTube community. It's just the same old this in Bangladesh, that in Bangladesh, what if this happened in Bangladesh? And the problem with that is people consider any foreign piece of media as good work, quality work.
Right.
And the entire effort is spent behind emulating that.
Right.
Like even if you see the recent music videos that got a lot of attention, most of them portray Dhaka as a very, either super exoticizes it, like it's turns into a caricature at one point of what Dhaka actually is.
Right.
And then you have the other people who are like, oh, this, look at Gulshan, this is Dhaka.
Yeah.
Right. And that, in effect, what's doing is these artists are actually very detached from the reality of Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, musicians will yell a lot that, people pirate their music, people don't have interest in music, people don't come to their shows. But my question is, have people stopped listening to music? They haven't stopped listening to music,
haven't,
right?
of course not,
they're either listening to like English rock or Bollywood, right? Everyone has their own niche. And end of the day, what in terms of Bangla music, what are we still listening to? Artsel, Miles, like everything is at least 10 years old.
Right.
And I think the whole idea of that Bangladeshi artist coming from Bangladeshi subculture sort of died with the ABC generation.
Right.
Right, and after that we have this, I'm still in the music industry.
Yeah.
We have this, because again, the reason I cite the music industry is because it's the creative industry that has the least amount of resources allocated to it.
Right.
Like even writers are doing better than musicians in this country. So what happens is that people can't really relate to the music they're listening to. People can't really relate to any of the content. Why? Because let's say we want, if you listen to Warface's Jibon Dhara album, it was, I think, released right around the fall of Ershad, right? And it's charged with political commentary, right? And it's such political commentary that it's even relevant to this day, right? It talks about the middle class being crunched in between two classes. It talks about how we're always under the foot of powers that be. These are stories that come out of like Bangla culture. Like you talk about Black, the way they mixed grunge and Robindra Sangeet with Hassan and John Bhai. That is something you don't see anymore nowadays, right? And even if you do, it's fusion. And what is fusion? You get a guy who can play the tabla, you get a guy who can play the sitar.
Do you need to, is that essential to be able to create something? Because at the end of the day, art in itself is expressing who you are. So someone who's in Gulshan and he or she has seen that life all their life, it would be actually pretentious for that person to go out and live and talk stories about the middle class lives. So in essence, it doesn't have to be about music or anything really.
Like if you consider a lot of the work that comes out from our privileged classes, it's either family stories that are similar to Monica Ali's Brick Lane and stuff like that. Essentially books written by housewives who need to get published. That's one. And the thing being art being the artists, right? All of that. But that would work if we did not operate in a capitalist framework, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever art you produce has to be sustainable. Or else you can't really commit to your art fully in Bangladesh, right? Every artist has a side gig.
Yeah.
Right. Every artist has a side gig.
Absolutely.
Like even full-time artists, like the ones that are very well known, have day jobs at corporate offices.
Yeah.
And I think that has an effect because when you're every day in, day out, when you're sitting in these corporate meetings where the media is crafted to sell certain things, when does it stop becoming an art and start becoming an ad? That's the question I need to ask, because you go watch a film in Bangladesh, you're going to see a biscuit ad at the bottom left, right? There you'll have banners coming in. You'll have there was this cooking show by a very prominent beverage company. And every other shot had the beverage in it.
Right.
Every other shot. And the intro, the first 3 seconds of the intro had 4 different instances of the logo. Right. So all of these artists, the ones that are established to a certain degree, they are working in this framework where everything at the end of the day has to appeal to the advertisers or the people who are sponsoring this thing. And that leads to a lot of good work being neutered. Right. Because let's say the stuff Sohidul Alam produces, right? It's hard-hitting political commentary. Right. But will anyone sponsor that? Right. And these questions essentially sort of put the art that our artists are producing in question, because is imitation art?
If you think about the global side of things, is it not very similar in that case? So I think that then the question becomes, is Bangladesh only, is anyone else really different in this regard anywhere else?
Yes. In the UK, although the past Tory governments messed it up, they have BBC, which is the publicly funded platform. And that had some great shows on it, right? We all have seen, David Attenborough, right? They have BBC. India has press freedom. India has massive amounts of platforms for any sort of artist, right? But if you come to Bangladesh, everyone, musicians, artists, everyone's sharing one platform, right? And most of these platforms are corporate sponsored. And the thing is, I'm not putting blame on corporate media here at all whatsoever. I'm not saying corporate media ruined Bangladesh, the creative industry of Bangladesh. What I'm saying is, at one point, artists had to make a choice. Do I feed my family? Because art is the only thing I know. I can't work at a bank. So they had to go to these corporates for funding, right? Because there was not a system in place. There were no funds. There were no scholarships for artists. So when you don't have that level of systemic support for your artists, then of course this will happen. And we saw that. If you look at K-pop, right? Would you consider K-pop art?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, you consider K-pop, but at the same time, right, K-pop is a form of art, but at the same time, it's very, very much curated by individuals to appeal to business, right? The entire point of K-pop is not to send a message, is not to tell a story, but to sell merch. Right. K-pop is sort of like the Fortnite of music, I would say, where the entire thing is just a storefront. And globally, speaking of the problem that we are having globally, we are definitely in the late capitalist stage, right? Where income inequality is at an insane levels that we've never seen before. And this has affected artists the most. A lot of artists over the past few years have lost their voice. And the internet, I know people will say the internet gives you the option of, cutting through the clutter and making it big. But that's the problem, the clutter. Like, as an audience, it's very difficult to wade through the piles of trash to find something you like. And I know YouTube has its algorithm, Facebook has its algorithm, but again, these algorithms are based on your past actions. So they will only show you stuff that you've already seen or you've known to like.
That's a big problem in itself. But what I want to go at is, would it have been any different with the way given what we had in the past, would it have been any different now if we changed something in the past? Or
remember 90s BTV?
Barely.
Yeah, but it had a massive cultural impact on it.
Oh yeah. Of course,
MacGyver, Captain Planet, right?
Jumanji.
And let's say BTV carried that. Right. Let's say BTV catered towards the very generation they nurtured.
Right.
It would be very different.
Yeah.
Rather than going to BTV and singing the same song for the next 20 years, maybe if they incorporated, let's say if D-Rockstars was a BTV thing rather than a D-Juice thing, right? Maybe we still would have had D-Rockstars. Right, but why did GP stop D-Rockstars? Because most probably it was not feasible for them.
Right.
So when you have these platforms that enable artists to showcase their talent without the pressure of appealing to the people who are paying you money, that would have a very different impact on art itself.
So what would an artist do in this scenario? Obviously, it's given the current landscape we have, if it's you're a creator, you want to create art, whether it's running your own meme page or creating music, what would be the best course of action in I guess like in general?
Like if you want to pursue any creative profession full time, and this includes engineers as well, because that's a creative profession, I would say, you have to first ask yourself, can I sustain this for the next 10 years? And what will stop me from doing this work? One thing that many journalists say is after they join a newspaper or a media agency, they stop writing. Like they can't focus on their creative work anymore. And the thing is, working in Bangladesh, the biggest piece of advice that I would give to young creative professionals is that do not try to showcase your creativity in professional work. Just check the boxes, make sure the objectives are there, make sure the message that you're sending regarding whatever you're selling or buying, these mostly involve promotional work for brands. Don't try to get emotionally attached to your creative work that you produce for other people, because that is the surefire way towards hating your own work.
Right.
Keep a separate time allocation for your own stuff. Let's say for me, every Tuesday night I sit down to write a page. Doesn't matter what I write, I just write a page. As long as I can keep that separate, keep my own personal creative efforts separate from my professional creative efforts, that's when I know I can have peace with my work. Or else I'll just bring my work home or take my home to work. Neither of which will actually work out.
So I guess when you say your professional line of work, what would be the example in this case? Would it be just working for Shout?
For Shout, I don't think it's really about producing work for me any longer. It's more like managing, guiding other people, because again, I'm aging. Like I'm turning 26 in a month. And I'm putting out a magazine for, let's say, age 13 to 25, right? So there's this huge 12 year gap that I can't fill. So that's when I need to have the right contributors of the right age group so that they can give me that perspective. So for me, it's a lot about letting go of certain creative aspects and focusing more on creative management. So it's also important to know when to stop doing something and start doing something different to adapt.
Going forward, though, do you get into creative ruts?
I'm in creative ruts all the time. Like there has never been a moment where I felt that, this idea is great. I'm going to just write this down and, have a lot of fun writing it. I maybe had fun writing 3 or 4 pieces in my entire lifetime. The rest of it was work. It's work.
How do you get out of those creative ruts? Do you have any specific ways, or?
I read a lot. That's what I do. Because
so you go back in consuming instead of creating.
Yes, that. And no, it's not about consuming. It's more about asking myself why. Why am I in this rut? So so it could be, let's say, some emotional trauma, or maybe I just don't feel like it. So finding the root cause of the rut is very important.
Do you have a routine that you follow on a day-to-day basis to help you do your creative work?
Not really, no.
Do you have any routine per se?
What I tend to do is I incorporate my different creative skills that I have, I guess I have some, into my everyday life. Let's say, before we started this podcast, I was telling you how I have my commute times put on a spreadsheet just to check which route is the fastest. So that's me learning data science. That's me learning how to deal with data. I have been known to be absolutely terrible with math. So what I do is I practice math by, counting the change and stuff like that. So end of the day, I don't really have a set time to practice, which I don't like actually, because I would want a separate time to practice and stuff like that. But end of the day, I just make do, a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah. Where do you think the industry is heading? Basically, the content industry in Bangladesh and globally.
It's heading into Bangladeshi content industry. It's heading into slave labor. No, it's because you have writers writing articles for $1, right?
Yeah.
And last week I had this big tech company come up to me because the thing is I write copy on the side as well.
Yeah.
So they came up to me and this is a huge ass tech company. They do software as a service.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do the website with me. Yeah. And I went ahead and we did all meetings and everything. Yeah. And end of the day, their budget was $20,000 to do the entire website content. Yeah. So when you have this low rates going, because I know for a fact I had an ad agency in last year, in 2018. Yeah. And that agency failed because small agency business models simply don't work. They don't produce enough money for you to get by. And we've seen that many a times with so many agencies closing down, including my own.
Right.
So until and unless we can convince the powers that be that our work is worth the amount of money that you're paying for, I don't think it's going to get any better.
Okay. And globally, where do you think it's heading?
Globally, it's quite sad actually, apart from Netflix. Maybe Netflix is investing in a lot of good shows, Amazon is. But when you think about, let's say, publishing or forget that, let's talk about movies, right? Yeah. We have so many rehashes, so many remakes,
first time in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Everything the first time in Bangladesh.
That's something I want to talk about. The people creating these first time in Bangladesh things and stuff like that, they have a very, very, very low opinion of the audience. Right. The thing is, this is something I call the zombification of the masses in Bangladesh. Whenever you sit down in a creative meeting, what will happen is you'll have a lot of great ideas and a lot of great ideas get thrown around, but then someone, usually the project lead, will throw in a wrench and say, the people won't get it. Yeah. People aren't smart enough to understand these references. Yeah. You don't need to put in these. And when you cut off so many things, right, so many smaller details that make up the bigger picture, you end up with something that's very hollow. Yeah. And that's something that is, I think, very prevalent with Bangladeshi media. Yeah. You watch something for a day and then you forget. Yeah. Right? You don't come back to the media you're consuming. Yeah. And that's because, it fails to draw in the people. Because in terms of content, there's a way that it distributes. You first have the key opinion leaders, right? These are the people who get these references. These are the people who get these smart references. And what they will do is they will watch it and they will share that information with their peer groups. Say, oh, did you see that reference? Oh, did you see that smart thing they did? Yeah. And what this does through word of mouth, people start considering that media as something smart. Yeah. And we have seen this word of mouth thing go with Game of Thrones, right? Mm-hmm. Why does Game of Thrones have such mass appeal in Bangladesh? Yeah. Right? Who's going to explain that to us? Yeah. If the masses are so dumb that they can't consume anything that Bangladeshi artists can produce, then how come they're consuming Game of Thrones?
Correct.
Right? And how come the books that get sold a lot, right? Yeah. People read Rabindranath Tagore. Yeah. Right? This is the same mass that reads Rabindranath Tagore. How can you say that these people cannot consume smart media, right? Bengal is a place where a lot of smart media was produced during the colonial times and post-colonial times, right? So how come in the last 40 years we have just given up our brains in order to consume mass-produced whatever that is being produced? Yeah. And the Bangladesh First thing, every year you'll see TV channel associations whining to the government to stop stop Bangladeshi ads in Indian channels. And what good does it do? And the thing is, all that TV channels show in Bangladesh are ads, shows tiny gaps in between. Yeah. So even after all of that, they could not make the content feasible. So how can they make the content feasible if, we start paying? It's not even about that. There's no ROI in TV right now, right? So in fact, if there is a new telefilm out or anything, it goes up on YouTube. Yeah. Right? People are watching it on YouTube. So that's an abject failure of a media industry. Yeah. Right.
It's interesting you talk about mass media, but if we look at the most highest watched stuff on digital platforms like YouTube and Facebook, it's usually something that is not produced with a lot of thought or a lot of thought process. In that case, do you think people who say that maybe the mass media is, taste has in fact dumbed down to a certain level, would you consider that as a...
Globally, long-form journalism is on the rise.
I agree.
Yeah, long-form, it's straight up data.
Yeah.
So that goes straight up against what people are saying. The thing is, when you interact with a certain channel, let's say you're on your phone and you're consuming content, you don't want to consume serious content on your phone.
Yeah.
Right? Like at night, what do? I just watch cat videos.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't need that yet.
Yeah.
I'm browsing Reddit on my phone.
Yeah.
For my phone, it's like very inconsistent, like not important content.
Yeah.
But when it's, let's say, a movie or a telefilm, we don't have the same expectations as we have from normal unpolished work on YouTube. And here's the thing. Recently, I think it's been a year. So Lindsay Ellis on YouTube did this video, Manufacturing Authenticity, where YouTubers intentionally try to appear more amateurish just to connect to their audiences, right? So a lot of things like that is going on.
Yeah.
And Eshober Porna, at the end of the day, when you think about where Bangladeshi media is going, it has no idea where it's going. Yeah. Honestly, like everyone's talking about digitizing, producing content from digital, producing content for digital, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But all the content you see that's on digital is basically adapted content. Right.
So I guess from the perspective of a creator wanting to create something for this industry, what is it that they'll need to think of before jumping in?
Your first 500 viewers. Yeah. If you can secure, let's forget 500. If you can secure 100 strangers who peruse your work, 100 strangers who consume your art, that means you have a solid foundation to build on. Right. So the first thing that you want to do, if you want to, let's say, make it as an artist in traditional means, you should definitely have a very strong audience. Let's say Ashes, right? Ashes, as a band, a lot of people have their own opinions, right? But when it comes to shows, people are there in like the crowding, right? People love Ashes. And that's the thing. They have that community, right? Rantages has that community that it can always fall back on. Think where, as a community, where your work fits. It's sort of like designing an MVP, right? For a star product. So in a sense, if you want to succeed by traditional means, then you will have to care for your audience. Or if you just want to do your own thing, then you do your own thing. You don't need advice.
Right. And what does, I guess, success look like for these people in terms of growing? So one thing obviously is making money. The other thing is, I guess, getting those 500 followers. Would you say being recognized internationally through credible things is something that Bangladeshi artists, or I guess artists anywhere, should be targeting as well?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the one who reached a global audience with Plantic.
It's not there yet.
I mean, you were on ESPN and then you got to the front page of Reddit. So you tell me.
Look, from my perspective, it's very important to build credibility. That's what I wanted to do with all these things, because let's be frank, Plantic is not a full-blown media house that makes money today. It's still a very amateurish media house.
It's a community. It's a community blog.
Correct. It's created a good community that it can get to, but at the same time, it's not a full-time thing yet. So my, I guess, understanding is that to get to that full-time point from A to B, you'll need some sort of credibility that adds to your name, a bit of weight to your name, and then use that to hopefully build advertising, I guess, situations that you can then monetize off.
Okay, so an easy way to do that would be get involved with the community, right? Let's say, for example, I'm a gamer, right? I'm involved with, let's say, Call of Duty community, right? I'm an active member, right? Let's say I'm not an active member, but I want to produce Call of Duty. Let's say I want to be a streamer. I want to stream video games. Like, that's an open field in Bangladesh right now. No one's going for it. what you should first do is figure out what the Call of Duty community wants to see from their streamers. How can you do that? You can ask them, but usually these sort of questions don't end up with good answers. What else you can do is you can see the streamers that these people are watching and the feedback they have regarding these streamers, and then build an idea of what people want from these communities, from these people who criticize the streams, and then make something that you agree with. Right, that both the audience agrees with and you agree with. Because the biggest problem that I see among young professionals is they're trying too hard to sell their work. Right. I know this kid who streams PUBG on Facebook, Pranto Gaming. His headphones are bigger than his head. And this kid has while his stream is going on, he has a Bikash number on the year.
Right.
So instead
he's got his own Patreon going on.
And here's the thing, like this kid thought, I don't have Patreon. What's the nearest thing I have to a Patreon?
Do you think that's smart?
That's insanely smart. Right. That's exactly.
Is it commendable?
It is commendable. Like it's it's a teenager finding his way out around the system, cyberspace, and that's something I did as well at 13. I knew how to make websites, but I don't know what to put in a website. Right. So I made a website and I was like, what can I do? I don't have any content. And then Twilight came out, and you know that, Jad.
Yes.
And
it's just shit on Twilight.
So overall, I think you need to understand where you want to go with your content. If you're looking towards, creative, if you want your creative profession to be one that makes a lot of money, then go for it. Be Michael Bay. I mean, why is Michael Bay Michael Bay? Because he can put in the sheer amount of product placements in a Michael Bay movie, right? He's a corporate.
So basically, no judgment.
I have no judgment for Michael Bay. There's a need.
I mean, not just Michael Bay. I guess anyone who goes for quantity.
No, I think that's.
Which doesn't mean you don't have quality, but
it's a choice you make. I mean, everyone has different priorities.
Right.
For us, at Rantages, the focus was on creative content, like original content, because that is something Bangladesh doesn't have, and that maintaining that position has led us to be the opinion leaders we are today.
Correct. I guess we're kind of towards the end of the conversation. Where do you think the future of the industry is going? I think I kind of asked you this question again.
I don't really have any hope from my generation, like the millennials or whatever. But I'm really excited about what the Gen Z kids bring to the table, because working with them at Shout has been a very, very different experience for me, because these kids, they're very straightforward. They don't have time to lose, because this is a generation that's going to be worse off than their previous generation for the first time ever in probably history. So they know this, and they're at the forefront of these, climate change activism, stuff like that. Bangladesh, like the students are at the forefront of climate change activism.
Yes.
And these kids know what matters, and they know the sufferings of the previous generation. So the kind of content they will produce will definitely be something we've never seen before. And I'm waiting for that to happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's even for me as well, like we generally shit on. I mean, it's common to shit on your next generation and always think of the days of the yore and the best times ever when people used to paint on caves. But it's awesome to see exactly, when you take that step back and see what people are doing. It's even looking at the student protests last year, wasn't it? It was last year. And it's students coming forward. Even everywhere else all over the world, it's brilliant. And I think recently I saw this girl on a TikTok video where she started doing makeup. I think she's 17, and she started talking about the situation in China,
Hong Kong,
in Hong Kong as well. Hong Kong. So it's actually pretty awesome to see. But from your perspective, what's your personal goal in the next 5 years?
My personal goal in the next 5 years, like in living in Bangladesh, it's very difficult to set 5-year plans.
Okay.
Honestly speaking.
Well, next year. From a creative perspective.
Honestly, right now, I want, like, the work I'm doing at Shout, it's actually very much, I'm trying to cater it to the Gen Z crowd. So in the next 1 or 2 years, I want to be heavily involved with this new generation of creative professionals. And if possible, I would like to guide them with my experience. Because that is something I genuinely enjoy doing.
If someone wants to become a journalist or be involved more with the content marketing that you do, what are 3 actionable steps that they can take, just dropping their headphones off, listen to this podcast, and they'll be like, I can take these 3 actions.
Write or whatever. Just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And find someone who can provide you with proper criticism. Like,
Right.
I'm not saying it has to be a mentor, even if it's someone who checks your grammar or whatever. Find someone who can tell you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And
say it as it is.
Yeah. And then just make as many mistakes as you can. Because one thing I've always noticed among young professionals is by the age 21, 22, they have this urge to like, I don't want to take any money from home. I want to be, independent and all of that. And that's a very problematic gesture, I would say.
Right.
Because up until university, you're expected to work on your own development. So what will you do? You'll teach a few students or work as a content writer, do part-time jobs to pay your tuition. But can you spend that time on skill development, right? If you spend that time learning, let's say, video editing, after you graduate, you'll be earning a lot more money than you will be during your graduation. And normally, think of it as a lot of people get a bit flustered that, their family is spending so much money behind their education and whatnot. Think of it as an investment.
Right.
Take it as an investment from your family. Think about starting a business. You would take investment from your family, right? Take investment as you yourself on that. And after you graduate, have the necessary skills to make it. After you, because for example, when I did not have any money for Starlight, I went to my mom and said, can I have $7,000 there? My friend is selling a core to do and I need a computer. I don't have a computer.
Right.
And I'm going to pay it back to you once I get my RS money. And I am now taking full responsibility of my mother. I'm taking care of her.
That's
and
brilliant.
She's actually now dependent on me.
Fantastic.
And I couldn't have done that if I did not take that investment from her.
Right.
And that is a perspective a lot of young people are missing because they're trying too hard to hustle. They're trying too hard to make it. But no, take your time. You don't have to be Zuckerberg. Everyone has their own time to bloom. I know people who bloomed after 40.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So think of developing yourself as a professional and people skills. People skills is something literally everyone lacks. Because one thing that I've noticed is during freelance negotiations, everyone, the vendor, the freelancer, would feel a bit weird asking about money. But the thing is, to that I would ask, does the client feel flustered when they're asking for your work? They're not. So why should you feel weird asking for your literally remuneration?
Exactly. It's literally paying for your services.
And the thing is, the client wants you to not talk money. Right. Because the first person to throw a number is actually the one who's going to lose.
Correct.
So know these things and remember that if you're going solo, that is, if you don't have a mentor or someone older giving you the work, and if you're getting the work yourself, never do anyone's work without a work order. Because I've actually counted the amount of money I lost due to bad agreements. I think I lost around 130,000 taka over the last 5 years simply on payments that did not happen.
Right.
So don't trust any clients. Right. That doesn't mean hate them, but don't take anything for granted. Don't take anything verbal for granted because a brand manager might come up to you and say, oh, we're going to do all of that, all of this, blah, blah, blah. And then a month later, be like, no, boss said no.
They've got deep people skills to sell themselves.
So when you're going to deal with these people, be on the defensive and know that if anyone is unwilling to give you a work order, you don't need that job because you won't get paid for it.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure having you, Rumman. I guess I'll look forward to more content and some memes. Check out India. That's a wrap.
Cool.
Yeah.